Ambassador Chun Wei-lin sat in her designated seat at the edge of the great chamber and waited for her name to be called. The seat was smaller than those given to the elder species. It was positioned near the back, behind a pillar that partially blocked her view of the central platform. These were small insults, but they were intentional. After 30 years, she had learned to recognize the difference between accident and design. The great chamber of the Galactic Concord was an impressive structure. It floated in neutral space, a massive station built from materials contributed by all 12 founding species. Crystal spires rose from the central floor. Light filtered through panels that shifted color based on which species held speaking rights. Today, the light was pale blue, indicating that the Valori held the floor. High Counselor Vareth stood at the central platform, his silver robes catching the light. The Valori were tall and slender, with skin that seemed to shimmer like water under moonlight. They had been among the first species to achieve faster-than-light travel, and they never let anyone forget it. The matter before us today is the 19th petition from the Human Provisional Territory, requesting elevation to full membership status, Vareth announced. His voice carried easily through the chamber, translated instantly into every language by the station systems. As in previous years, this petition includes a request to remove military restrictions placed upon humanity under the Provisional Species Protocol. Chung kept her face neutral. She had given this same petition 18 times before. She knew every word. She also knew the outcome before it was announced. The Council has reviewed the petition, Vareth continued. We acknowledge that humanity has maintained peace within their territory. We acknowledge their contributions to scientific research and cultural exchange. However, the fundamental concerns that led to their provisional status remain unaddressed. A murmur passed through the chamber. Representatives from various species shifted in their seats. Some looked at Chun with something like sympathy. Others did not bother to hide their satisfaction. Humanity's history of internal warfare remains unprecedented among spacefaring species, Vareth said. No other member of this Concord engaged in planetary-scale conflict after achieving nuclear capability. No other species has demonstrated such persistent inability to resolve disputes without violence. Until humanity can prove they have evolved beyond these tendencies, the restrictions must remain in place. Chun rose from her seat. Protocol allowed her to respond. High Counselor, she said, humanity has maintained perfect peace for 3 decades. We have not engaged in any military action since joining the Concord. We have complied with every restriction, every inspection, every limitation placed upon us. At what point does our record speak louder than our history? Vareth's expression did not change. Your record is commendable, Ambassador. But 30 years is nothing. The Valori have maintained peace for 12,000 years. The Kethra for 8,000. Your species proved its capacity for self-destruction within 2 centuries of discovering nuclear power. The scars on your world are still visible from orbit. Those scars are exactly why we understand the cost of war, Chun replied. We learned. We changed. Perhaps. Or perhaps you simply lack the opportunity. Vareth gestured toward the assembled representatives. The Council's decision stands. Humanity will remain under the Provisional Species Protocol. Military vessels above frigate class remain prohibited. This petition is denied. The light in the chamber shifted to neutral white, indicating the session had ended. Representatives began to rise, conversations breaking out in dozens of languages. Chun remained standing for a moment, allowing herself one breath of frustration before composing herself. She made her way toward the exit, nodding politely to those who acknowledged her. Most did not. A clicking sound drew her attention. The Kethra delegate had moved to intercept her. Kethra were insectoid beings, their bodies covered in hard shells that ranged from deep brown to black. They communicated through a combination of clicks, gestures, and pheromones. The translation systems handled most of it, though some nuance was always lost. "Ambassador Chen," the Kethra said, its voice rendered as a pleasant, neutral tone by the translator. "I wish to express my sympathy regarding the Council's decision." "Thank you, Representative Sketh. I noticed your delegation abstained from the vote again." "We abstained because we remember," Sketh replied. "The Kethra were once a provisional species as well. It took us 400 years to earn full membership. We were told we were too aggressive, too numerous, too strange. Those restrictions shaped us in ways that still affect our society." Chun studied the insectoid face, trying to read meaning in features designed by evolution she could barely comprehend. "May I ask why you share this with me?" "Because patience is not the same as acceptance," Sketh said. "And because I believe humanity understands this distinction better than most." The Kethra delegate clicked something that the translator rendered as a formal farewell, then moved away. Chun watched Sketh disappear into the crowd, then continued toward the human section of the station. The journey took 20 minutes. Human quarters were located in one of the outer rings, far from the central chambers where important decisions were made. The location was officially due to architectural considerations. Chun had long ago stopped believing such explanations. She entered the command center where Admiral Yuki Tanaka was waiting. Tanaka was a small woman with gray streaking her black hair and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. She had commanded humanity's defensive fleet for 15 years, which meant she had spent 15 years commanding a force deliberately kept too small to matter. "I watched the broadcast," Tanaka said. 19th time's the charm, apparently not. They didn't even pretend to consider it seriously. Chun removed her formal jacket and tossed it over a chair. "Vareth practically smiled when he denied us. The Valori have never hidden their contempt. At least they're honest about it. Honest contempt is still contempt." Chun moved to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth continued to orbit its sun. 8 billion humans went about their lives, most of them unaware of how little their species mattered in the grand scheme of galactic politics. "How long are we supposed to accept this, Yuki? How many more generations have to grow up being told they're too dangerous to be trusted?" Tanaka was quiet for a moment. "I received a message from home while you were in session." Something in her tone made Chun turn. "What kind of message?" Long-range sensors picked up something at the galactic edge. A fleet. Massive. The signature doesn't match anything in Concord records. Chun felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. How massive? Preliminary estimates suggest over 300 capital-class vessels. Possibly more. That's larger than the entire Concord combined fleet. I know. Chun moved to the tactical display and pulled up the sensor data. The readings were incomplete, gathered from monitoring stations at the extreme edge of known space. But even the fragments painted a terrifying picture. Ships of enormous size, moving in precise formation, heading toward Concord territory. Do we know who they are? The signature has similarities to records from 800 years ago, Tanaka said, before humanity was even aware that alien life existed. The Thornax Dominion. I've never heard of them. Most species prefer not to speak of them. They were a conquering force that swept through this region of the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. The original Concord was formed specifically to stop them. It took the combined might of all 12 founding species to push them back, and now they're returning. So it appears. Chun stared at the display, watching the estimated trajectory of the unknown fleet. If the projections were accurate, they would reach Concord frontier territories within months. We need to inform the Council, she said. Already done. Emergency session scheduled for tomorrow. They'll mobilize the Concord fleet. Probably? and they'll expect us to contribute our frigates as support vessels. Chun heard what Tanaka was not saying. Humanity would be sent to fight. They would bleed and die alongside the other species. But they would do so in ships deliberately kept small and weak, while the elder species commanded the real power. "There's something else," Tanaka said. She moved to a secure terminal and entered a code. A new display appeared, showing a location in the outer asteroid belt of Earth's solar system. "I received another message today. From Director Okonkwo." Chun knew that name. She knew what it represented. Project Unchained? They've completed the final tests. It's ready. For 30 years, humanity had obeyed the restrictions placed upon them. They had submitted to inspections, allowed monitoring of their shipyards, limited their military to frigate-class vessels. They had been model citizens of the Concord, but they had never stopped preparing. Chun looked at the display showing the hidden facility in the asteroid belt. She thought about the Council's contempt, about 30 years of small insults and large ones, about generations of humans growing up, being told they were too violent to be trusted with real power. And she thought about the fleet coming from the darkness, 300 ships strong, heading toward a galaxy that had forgotten what real war looked like. What a W! 6 months had passed since the first detection, and the war had already proven more terrible than anyone had imagined. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the HSS Defiance, a frigate that suddenly felt very small. Through the viewport, she could see the aftermath of the Battle of Varith Prime. Debris fields stretched across thousands of kilometers. Some of the wreckage was still burning, fed by leaking atmosphere and fuel. Most of the burning pieces had once been Concord vessels. "Casualty report," she said quietly. Her executive officer, Commander James Morrison, pulled up the data on his tablet. His face was pale. 43 Concord vessels destroyed. 12 more severely damaged. The Valori flagship Eternal Grace is gone. High Admiral Varith with it. Tanaka absorbed the information without visible reaction. Varith had been the same official who denied humanity's petition year after year. She had disliked him intensely, but she had not wanted him dead. Thornax losses? 3 vessels confirmed destroyed. Possibly 2 more damaged. The mathematics were horrifying. 43 ships lost to destroy 3. If those numbers held, the Concord would run out of vessels long before the Thornax ran out of patience. What about our frigates? All 12 survived, Admiral. Minor damage to the Delhi and the Sao Paulo. No casualties. Tanaka nodded. The human frigates had been assigned to rearguard duty, officially to protect supply lines. In reality, the Concord commanders had not trusted them with frontline positions. That distrust had accidentally saved their lives. A communication signal flashed on the main display. Tanaka recognized the identifier as coming from the Concord command ship, the Kethra vessel Hive Ascendant. Since Varath's death, Representative Sketh had assumed emergency command of combined forces. "Put it through," Tanaka ordered. Sketh's insectoid face appeared on screen. The translation systems rendered the clicking speech into words. Admiral Tanaka. The Command Council is convening in 1 hour aboard the Hive Ascendant. Your presence is requested. Requested or required. At this point, the distinction has become meaningless. We need every perspective we can gather. The signal ended. Tanaka turned to Morrison. "You have the bridge. I'll take a shuttle over." "Admiral." Morrison hesitated. "What do you think they are going to decide?" Tanaka looked out at the debris field one more time. "I think they're going to realize that everything they believed about war was wrong. And I think that realization is going to come too late." The shuttle ride to the Hive Ascendant took 20 minutes. Tanaka used the time to review the intelligence reports that had come in over the past months. The picture they painted was grim. The Thornax Dominion was not simply an invasion force. They were a harvesting operation. Every world they conquered was stripped of resources, both material and biological. Populations were not enslaved or integrated. They were processed. The reports did not specify what that meant, but the refugee accounts suggested horrors that defied imagination. The Thornax themselves were massive beings, heavily armored and seemingly designed for combat. Their ships reflected this philosophy. Where Concorde vessels were elegant and efficient, Thornax warships were brutal and overwhelming. They did not maneuver gracefully. They simply advanced, absorbing damage that would cripple any other vessel, until they were close enough to tear their enemies apart. The Concorde had spent 800 years perfecting the art of peace. They had forgotten that peace was not a natural state. It was a condition that required the capacity for violence to maintain. Tanaka arrived at the command council to find representatives from every major Concorde species already assembled. The chamber was circular, with holographic displays showing fleet positions and enemy movements. The atmosphere was tense. Several representatives were arguing in raised voices. "We must negotiate," a Valori delegate was saying. Her silver robes were disheveled, her composure cracked. The Thornax must want something. Resources, territory, recognition. "We can offer them terms. They do not negotiate." Sketh's translated voice cut through the argument. 800 years ago, our ancestors tried diplomacy. The Thornax response was to destroy the diplomatic vessel and harvest its crew. They do not want resources. They want consumption. "Then we fight," another delegate said. This one was Krullen, a species known for their industrial capacity. "We build more ships. We replace our losses. With what crews?" The question came from a small, furry being that Tanaka recognized as a Malori representative. "Our shipyards can produce vessels. We cannot produce trained personnel at the same rate. Every battle costs us experienced officers and crews that take years to replace. Then we retreat, fall back to core worlds and establish defensive positions. That condemns the frontier colonies. Billions of beings." The argument continued, voices rising and falling. Tanaka listened but did not speak. She was the only human in the room, and her opinion had not been requested. Sketh noticed her silence. The Kethra commander clicked for attention, and the chamber gradually quieted. "Admiral Tanaka has not offered her assessment," Sketh said. "Perhaps a perspective from outside our traditional thinking would be valuable." Every eye turned to her. Some expressions held curiosity. Others held barely concealed contempt. A human offering military advice? The very idea seemed absurd to several of the delegates. Tanaka stepped forward. "You want my assessment? Here it is. You're losing because you don't understand what you're fighting." "We know precisely what we're fighting," the Valori delegate snapped. "We have extensive historical records. You have records of victory. You remember the war you won 800 years ago, but you've forgotten what it cost to win it." Tanaka pulled up a display showing the original Thornax War. "Your ancestors lost 2/3 of their combined fleet before they pushed the Dominion back. They didn't win through superior tactics or technology. They won through attrition, through throwing ships and lives at the enemy until the cost of continuing became too high. What is your point?" "My point is that you don't fight like that anymore. Your fleets are designed for patrol and peacekeeping. Your tactics emphasize precision and minimal casualties. You've spent 8 centuries avoiding the kind of war your ancestors survived." Tanaka let the words sink in. The Thornax never stopped. They've been out there, beyond the galactic edge, doing what they've always done. Conquering, consuming, evolving, and now they're back. And they remember exactly how to fight a real war. Silence filled the chamber. "What would you suggest?" Sketh asked. "I would suggest you stop treating this as a border conflict and start treating it as an extinction event. Because that's what it is. The Thornax aren't coming for your territory. They're coming for everything. Every world. Every species. Every being. And humanity?" The question came from a delegate Tanaka didn't recognize. What is humanity prepared to contribute to this effort? Tanaka met the delegate's gaze. Humanity is prepared to contribute everything we have. Our frigates, our crews, our lives. But I want to be clear about something. We didn't choose to be a provisional species. We didn't choose to be limited to small ships and defensive roles. Those restrictions were imposed on us because you believed we were too dangerous. Your point? My point is that you were right. Humans are dangerous. We are exactly what you feared we would become. And right now, that fear might be the only thing that saves you." The chamber erupted in confusion. Delegates demanded clarification. What does she mean? What was humanity hiding? But before Tanaka could respond, an alarm blared through the chamber. A tactical officer rushed in with urgent news. The Thornax fleet had changed course. They were no longer advancing toward the frontier. They were heading directly for the core systems. "How long until they reach us?" Sketh demanded. "At their current speed, approximately 6 weeks." 6 weeks. Tanaka did the calculations in her head. The Concorde fleet was scattered, damaged, and demoralized. Even if they gathered every available ship, they could not match the Thornax numbers. She stepped back from the chaos, pulling out her personal communicator. The message she sent was encrypted, routed through channels that officially did not exist. "This is Admiral Tanaka. Authorization code Prometheus 7. The doctrine of necessity is invoked. Repeat, doctrine of necessity is invoked. Initiate deployment sequence for Project Unchained. Timeline is 6 weeks." The response came almost immediately. It was text only, but the words carried the weight of 30 years of preparation. Acknowledged. The chains are broken. We are coming. Tanaka closed the communicator and looked back at the chaos in the command chamber. Delegates argued about retreat strategies and diplomatic options. None of them understood that everything had just changed. Humanity had spent 30 years being told they were too dangerous to be trusted, too violent, too unpredictable. They had accepted the restrictions, followed the rules, played the part of obedient newcomers. But they had never stopped being what they were. The Thornax were coming to harvest the galaxy. They expected to find prey. They were about to find something else entirely. Tanaka allowed herself one small smile. 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, the Concorde would see what humans could build when they stopped asking for permission. And the Thornax would learn why every species in the galaxy should have been afraid of humanity all along. Not because humans loved war, but because they had never forgotten how to win one. The asteroid had no official name. On civilian charts, it was designated AX7741. One of millions of unremarkable rocks drifting through the outer belt of Earth's solar system. Mining surveys had declared it low value decades ago. No one had reason to look at it twice. That was exactly the point. Admiral Tanaka's shuttle approached through a carefully mapped corridor, avoiding the sensor nets and patrol routes that would have detected any unauthorized vessel. The journey from Concorde space had taken 3 weeks at maximum speed. Every hour felt like a countdown. Approaching final checkpoint, her pilot announced. Transmitting authentication codes now. The asteroid's surface revealed nothing unusual. Gray rock, crater marks, the occasional glint of metallic deposits. But as Tanaka watched, a section of the surface began to shift. What had appeared to be solid stone slid aside, revealing an opening large enough to swallow a cruiser. The shuttle descended into darkness. Lights flickered on as they passed through layer after layer of concealment. Tanaka had read the reports, studied the schematics, approved the budgets. But nothing had prepared her for seeing it in person. Hades Station stretched before them, a hollow carved into the heart of the asteroid. The interior space was massive, kilometers across, lit by artificial suns that hung like captured stars. And floating in that vast chamber, surrounded by construction frames and service vessels, were the ships. Tanaka counted 5 of them. Each was enormous, dwarfing anything she had ever seen. The smallest was at least 2 kilometers long. The largest approached 3. "Welcome to Hades Station, Admiral." The voice came through the shuttle's communication system. "Director Okonkwo is waiting for you in the primary observation deck." The shuttle landed on a platform that seemed tiny compared to its surroundings. Tanaka stepped out and found herself staring upward at the nearest vessel's hull. The metal was dark, almost black, with minimal external features. No elegant curves or decorative elements. This ship had been designed for one purpose only. Director Amara Okonkwo met her at the lift that would take them to the observation deck. She was a tall woman with close-cropped gray hair and hands that still showed calluses from her years as an engineer before she became an administrator. She had overseen Project Unchained since its inception. "Admiral Tanaka, it's been too long. I wish I was visiting under better circumstances." "The circumstances are exactly what we always feared. That's why we built these." Okonkwo gestured toward the vessels as the lift rose. "Shall I give you the tour?" They emerged onto an observation platform that provided a view of the entire chamber. From here, Tanaka could see all 5 ships in their berths, along with the network of fabrication facilities, supply depots, and support infrastructure that made Hades Station possible. The Concord Treaty prohibited U.S. from building vessels above frigate class, Okonkwo began. They defined warships by their weapons, their armor, their combat capabilities. So we asked ourselves a question. What if we built something that didn't fit their definitions? She pointed to the nearest vessel. The Prometheus, officially classified as a mobile industrial platform. No primary weapons. No heavy armor. Technically not a warship at all. Then what is it? A factory. Okonkwo smiled. A factory that flies. The Prometheus carries 17 fabrication bays, each capable of producing combat drones, fighter craft, and even frigate-class vessels from raw materials. She can harvest asteroids, process ore, and manufacture a complete combat squadron in 48 hours. Tanaka stared at the massive ship. The implications were staggering. She doesn't need to be a warship. She builds warships. Exactly. The Concord worried about what weapons we might carry. They never considered what weapons we might create. They moved along the observation platform, and Okonkwo described each vessel in turn. Atlas, heavy transport and repair ship. She carries enough spare parts and raw materials to keep a fleet operational indefinitely. Her repair base can restore a damaged frigate to full combat capability in hours. Sisyphus, resource extraction specialist. She can strip a medium asteroid down to nothing in a week. Whatever she harvests feeds directly into the fabrication systems of the other ships. Heracles, the closest thing we have to a traditional warship, though she still doesn't qualify under Concord definitions. Her primary function is point defense and escort. She carries enough anti-missile systems and fighter bays to protect the other 4 from any attack. And that one? Tanaka pointed to the largest vessel, the one that dominated the chamber. Pandora. Okonkwo's voice carried a note of something that might have been pride or might have been fear. She's special. Special how? The other ships create conventional weapons. Drones, fighters, frigates. Pandora creates something else. Okonkwo paused, choosing her words carefully. We knew that the Concorde might eventually face a threat beyond their capacity to handle. We also knew that conventional warfare might not be enough. So we designed Pandora to produce asymmetric solutions. Asymmetric solutions? Weapons that change the nature of conflict. Self-replicating drone swarms. Gravity manipulation systems. Things that the Concorde specifically prohibited because they were too dangerous. Okonkwo met Tanaka's gaze. We built Pandora because we hoped we would never need her. But if we did, we wanted to make sure we could end any war against any enemy, no matter the cost. Tanaka walked to the edge of the platform and looked down at the 5 vessels. 30 years of secret work. Trillions of credits diverted through shell companies and fake mining operations. Thousands of engineers and workers who had dedicated their lives to a project they could never speak about. Why? She asked. When we started this, there was no Thornax threat. We were just a provisional species trying to survive in a galaxy that didn't want us. Why build all this? Okonkwo joined her at the railing. Because we understood something the Concorde forgot. Peace is not a natural state. It has to be defended. And the best way to defend it is to be so dangerous that no one ever wants to fight you. We could have used this to conquer them. The Concorde, I mean. These ships could have crushed their fleets and made humanity the dominant power in the galaxy. Yes, we could have. Okonkwo's voice was quiet. But that's not who we are. We didn't build these ships to rule. We built them so that we could never be ruled. There's a difference. Tanaka thought about the Thornax fleet, advancing toward Concorde space. Thought about the desperate council meetings, the arguments about retreat and surrender. Thought about all the species who had spent 30 years treating humanity as a dangerous child that needed to be contained. They're not going to be happy when they see these, she said. No, they're going to be terrified. And then they're going to be grateful. Okonkwo turned away from the railing. Come, there's something else you need to see. They took another lift, descending into the depths of Hades Station. The corridors here were narrower, more utilitarian. Security became heavier as they progressed. Finally, they reached a sealed door that required 3 separate authentication methods to open. Beyond the door was a small chamber. In the center stood a pedestal, and on the pedestal was a device no larger than a human fist. What is this? The real secret of Project Unchained. Okonkwo approached the pedestal, but did not touch the device. We call it the Genesis Core. It's the template that all our fabrication systems use. Every drone, every fighter, every frigate that our ships produce is built according to designs stored in this device. And it contains something else. What? The ability to improve. The Genesis Core doesn't just store designs. It analyzes them, tests them, and evolves them. Every battle, every engagement, every piece of data we gather feeds back into the core. The ships we build tomorrow will be better than the ships we build today. And the ships we build next week will be better still. Tanaka understood. This was not just a fleet. This was a system designed to learn, to adapt, to overcome any obstacle through continuous improvement. The Thornax had spent 800 years perfecting their methods of war. Humanity had spent 30 years building something that could match their evolution in weeks. One last question, Tanaka said. Does the crew understand what they're being asked to do? When we emerge from hiding, we'll be violating every treaty we ever signed. We'll be revealing that humanity has been lying to the Concorde for 3 decades. Even if we win, they might never trust us again. Okonkwo nodded slowly. I asked every crew member that question before they signed on. Every engineer, every technician, every pilot. Do you know what they told me? What? They said that trust can be rebuilt. But extinction is forever. If the price of survival is the Concorde's anger, then we'll pay it. And if they can't forgive us for saving them, she smiled, but there was sadness in it, then at least they'll be alive to hold the grudge. The lift took them back to the main observation deck. Below, the 5 great vessels waited in their berths. Crews were making final preparations. Fabrication bays were coming online. In the depths of each ship, the Genesis Core's designs were being loaded into production systems. "How long until we're ready to deploy?" Tanaka asked. 48 hours. The ships are complete. We're just loading final supplies and running system checks. Tanaka looked at the Prometheus, the Atlas. The Concorde's last stand gathered in the Varus system, named for the High Admiral who had died defending it. 87 vessels from 12 species formed a defensive line around the system's inhabited worlds. Behind them, 14 billion civilians waited and prayed to whatever gods their species believed in. Representative Sketh stood on the bridge of the Hive Ascendant, watching the tactical display with compound eyes that had seen too much death in recent weeks. The Thornax fleet was hours away. 412 capital ships, plus countless support vessels. The mathematics of the coming battle were simple. The Concorde would fight. The Concorde would lose. And then the harvesting would begin. "All vessels report ready," the Kethra tactical officer announced. "Fleet commanders await your orders." Sketh clicked a response that the translator rendered as a sigh. What orders could make any difference? They had tried every strategy, every tactic, every desperate maneuver. The Thornax simply absorbed their attacks and kept coming. "Tell them to hold position. We will make our stand here." A communication officer spoke up. "Representative, we're receiving a signal. Human frequency. Admiral Tanaka?" Sketh had not seen the human commander since she departed weeks ago, claiming her frigates needed repairs at their home shipyards. "No, sir. The signal is coming from... I'm not certain." Multiple massive contacts just emerged from jump space at the system's edge. Sketh turned to the main display. 5 new signatures had appeared, each larger than anything in the Concorde fleet, larger than anything in the Thornax fleet. The tactical system struggled to classify them, returning error messages and confused readings. "What are those?" "Unknown vessel types, sir. They're transmitting human identification codes." Before Sketh could respond, a new signal came through. The display flickered, and Admiral Tanaka's face appeared. But she was not on a frigate bridge. She stood in a command center of impossible scale, surrounded by equipment that bore no resemblance to any Concorde technology. "Representative Sketh, I apologize for the delay. We had some preparations to complete." Sketh's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Admiral, what is this? What are those ships?" "Those ships are what humanity built while you were telling us we couldn't be trusted. They're what 30 years of restrictions created." Tanaka's voice was calm, but her eyes held something fierce. "The Concorde prohibited us from building battleships. So we didn't build battleships. We built something else." The 5 massive vessels began to move, advancing toward the Thornax fleet. As they traveled, smaller shapes began to emerge from their hulls. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Fighter craft, combat drones, and frigate-class vessels poured out of fabrication bays, forming up in attack formations. "We call them siege carriers," Tanaka continued. "They don't fight. They produce. Every hour we spend in combat, our fleet grows larger. Every resource we capture gets processed into new vessels. You wanted to keep us weak, Representative. Instead, you forced us to become something that can't be stopped." The Thornax fleet had noticed the new arrivals. Their formation began to shift, capital ships turning to face the unexpected threat. The Dominion had conquered countless species. They had never encountered anything like this. "Admiral, Sketh struggled to process what was happening. You violated the treaty. You lied to the Concord for decades. Yes, we did. And when this is over, we'll answer for that. But right now, there's a fleet of 400 ships coming to harvest every living being in this system. Would you like to discuss our treaty violations, or would you like us to stop them? The first Thornax vessels opened fire on the approaching human fleet. Plasma beams and kinetic projectiles streaked across space. Some struck the newly manufactured drones, destroying them instantly. More kept coming. The siege carriers' fabrication bays were running at full capacity, replacing losses faster than the Thornax could inflict them. All Concord vessels, Sketh broadcast on the command frequency. Hold position. Let the humans engage first. Provide support fire when targets become available. The battle that followed would be studied for centuries. The Thornax fleet was brutal and experienced. Their tactics had crushed every opponent they had faced. But they had never fought an enemy that grew stronger with every passing minute. The Prometheus led the human formation, its 17 fabrication bays working continuously. Automated systems harvested debris from destroyed vessels, processing the material into new drones and fighters. The Genesis Core analyzed Thornax weapons and armor, feeding improvements back to production systems in real time. Each wave of human craft was slightly better than the last. The Atlas followed close behind, its repair bays working miracles. Damaged frigates that would have been abandoned by Concord standards were restored to combat effectiveness in hours. The human fleet did not just replace its losses. It recycled them. Sisyphus hung back, its collection systems gathering every fragment of destroyed Thornax vessels. Their alien alloys and exotic materials were broken down and fed into the production chain. The enemy was literally being used to fuel their own destruction. Heracles formed a defensive screen around the other carriers, its point defense systems creating an almost impenetrable barrier. Thornax strike craft that attempted to attack the vulnerable production ships were shredded before they could close to effective range. And Pandora waited. 3 hours into the battle, the Thornax commander finally understood what was happening. The human fleet had started with a few thousand drones and fighters. Now they numbered in the tens of thousands. The production rate was accelerating as more resources became available. The mathematics that had guaranteed Thornax victory were inverting. The Dominion fleet began to concentrate fire on the siege carriers themselves. Hundreds of capital ships coordinated their attacks, pouring devastating firepower at the Prometheus. The massive vessel shuddered under the assault. Hull breaches appeared. Systems failed. For a moment, it seemed the Thornax had found a winning strategy. Then Pandora moved. The largest of the human vessels had remained silent throughout the battle, its fabrication bays apparently inactive. Now ports opened along its hull, and something new emerged. They were small, barely larger than a human fighter craft. But they moved differently, with a coordination that seemed almost organic. They flowed toward the Thornax capital ships in streams of silver. "What are those?" Sketh demanded. Tanaka's response was quiet. The asymmetric option. Self-replicating attack drones. They consume enemy vessels and use the materials to make more of themselves. The silver swarms reached the first Thornax capital ship. They did not attack with weapons. They landed on the hull and began to burrow, breaking down armor plating at the molecular level and converting it into more drones. Within minutes, the massive warship was being consumed from the outside in. The Thornax fleet panicked. Vessels that had never retreated began to break formation, trying to escape the spreading swarms. But the drones were everywhere now, multiplying faster than they could be destroyed. Capital ships that had shrugged off concentrated Concord firepower were being eaten alive by clouds of silver machines. "Admiral," A Thornax signal cut through the chaos. The being on the screen was massive, armored, and clearly terrified. Admiral of the human vessels. We request communication. Tanaka's face appeared alongside the Thornax commanders. This is Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the human siege fleet. State your request. We will withdraw. We will leave this space. Never return. The Thornax commander's voice was desperate. Call off your swarms, please. The bridge of the Hive Ascendant was completely silent. Every Concord officer watched the exchange with disbelief. The Thornax, the species that had never negotiated, that had harvested entire civilizations without pause, was begging. Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried across every frequency in the system. 800 years ago, you came to this galaxy. You consumed worlds. You harvested billions. The Concord stopped you, but barely. You retreated and waited. And now you've come back, expecting to find the same prey you left behind. We did not know. We did not understand what you were. No, you didn't. Tanaka leaned forward. Humanity is what happens when you teach a species that the universe is dangerous. We are what you created every time you showed us that peace requires strength. We built these ships because we knew that someday, something would come that would try to destroy everything we love. We just didn't know it would be you. Please, call off the swarms. I will. On one condition. Tanaka's eyes were hard. You will retreat to your home territory. You will never return to Concord space. And you will remember this day. Remember what happened when you tried to harvest humanity. Remember what we're capable of. And remember that we chose to let you live. Why? Why would you spare us? Tanaka smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because we're not like you. We could destroy your entire fleet. We could follow you home and burn your worlds. We have the power to do to you what you've done to countless others. But we won't. Not because we're weak. Because we're choosing not to. That's the difference between us. She paused. Also, I want witnesses. When other species out there hear about the Thornax Dominion, I want them to know what happened when you came for us. I want them to understand that humanity isn't prey. We never were. The Thornax fleet began to withdraw 3 months after the Battle of Vareth. The Galactic Concord gathered for the most important session in its history. The Great Chamber looked different than it had before the war. The arrangement of seats had been changed. Humanity's delegation no longer sat in the back, behind a pillar. They occupied a position near the center, equal to any elder species. The change had happened without formal announcement. No one had objected. Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin stood at the central platform, facing the assembled representatives. The light filters showed neutral white, indicating that no single species held speaking rights. This was a session for everyone. The matter before us today is complex, Chen began. Humanity stands accused of violating the Treaty of Concord. For 30 years, we maintained a secret military program. We built vessels that exceeded our permitted classifications. We deceived the Concord and every species within it. Murmurs passed through the chamber. Some of the delegates looked angry. Others looked uncertain. A few showed expressions that might have been respect. These accusations are accurate. We did all of these things. We lied to you. We violated your trust. And I stand before you today to explain why we did it, and to accept whatever judgment this council decides. Chum paused, gathering her thoughts. When humanity joined the Concord, we were given provisional status. We were told that our history of internal conflict made us too dangerous to be trusted with full membership. We accepted these restrictions because we had no choice. But we never accepted the premise behind them. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with representatives from species who had spent decades dismissing her petitions. You saw our history of warfare as evidence that we were flawed, broken, less evolved than the species who had achieved peace before reaching the stars. But you misunderstood what that history meant. We didn't fight wars because we loved violence. We fought them because we had not yet learned what you had learned, that some conflicts cannot be resolved through strength alone. The wars we fought taught us terrible lessons. The cost of nuclear weapons, the horror of genocide, the empty victory of mutual destruction. We learned these lessons the hard way, through centuries of blood and suffering. And those lessons shaped us into something different than what we might have been. Chun pulled up a display showing the siege fleet, still holding position in the Verith system. When you told us we couldn't build battleships, you gave us a choice. We could accept our place as permanent inferiors, forever dependent on your protection. Or we could find another way. We chose to find another way. We didn't build warships because we wanted to conquer you. We built them because we understood something that 800 years of peace had taught you to forget. The universe is not safe. Threats exist that cannot be negotiated with, cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped by anything except overwhelming force. The Thornax proved us right. And when they came, when your fleets were broken and your worlds were falling, we were ready, because we had never stopped preparing. Chun lowered her voice. I am not proud of the deception. I would have preferred honesty, but honesty was not an option you gave us. Every year, we asked to be treated as equals. Every year, you refused. You left us no path to legitimacy, so we took an illegitimate one instead. Now the question is, what happens next? You can condemn us. You can expel us from the Concord. You can try to take our ships and restore the old restrictions. But I think you all know how that would end. She waited, letting the implications sink in. Or you can recognize that the galaxy has changed. The Thornax will not be the last threat we face. There are things out there, beyond the stars we know, that make the Dominion look peaceful by comparison. The universe is vast and old and dangerous. And the only way any of us survive is together. Humanity is not asking for your forgiveness. We're asking for your partnership. Real partnership. Not the false version where you dictate terms and we obey. The kind where every species contributes what it can, where no one is treated as lesser, where we face the darkness together. She stepped back from the platform. That's all I have to say. The decision is yours. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Representative Sketh rose from the Kethra delegation. I wish to speak. The light filters shifted to acknowledge the request. 15 years ago, I learned of Project Unchained. Our intelligence services discovered fragments of the program. I reported this to our government. We debated what to do with the information. Shocked murmurs filled the chamber. Sketh waited for them to quiet. We decided to say nothing, not because we approved of humanity's deception, but because we remembered our own history. 400 years the Kethra spent under provisional restrictions. 400 years of being told we were too numerous, too aggressive, too alien. We know what it means to be judged by those who have never faced our challenges. More than that, we understood what humanity was trying to do. They were not building weapons of conquest. They were building weapons of survival. And we believed, even then, that someday those weapons would be needed. Sketh turned to face the full chamber. Today I make a formal motion. I move that all charges against humanity be dismissed. Further, I move that the Provisional Species Protocol be dissolved entirely for all species, effective immediately. No being should ever again be judged unworthy of full membership based on the sins of their ancestors. Another voice rose. The Mallory delegate, small and fur-covered, stood on his seat to be seen. I second this motion. The Mallory were a peaceful species when we joined the Concord. We had no wars in our history, no weapons, no violence. And when the Thornax came, we could do nothing. We could only watch and wait and hope that someone stronger would save us. Humanity saved us. Not because we had earned their protection, not because of any treaty or obligation, but because they had built the strength to do so, and they chose to use it for all of us rather than just themselves. That choice means more than any violation they committed. That choice deserves our gratitude, not our condemnation. One by one, other delegates rose to speak. Some expressed anger at the deception. Some demanded assurances that humanity would not use their new power to dominate the Concord. But the overwhelming sentiment was clear. The galaxy had changed. The old rules no longer applied. When the vote was called, it was not close. The motion passed by a margin of 9-3. The Provisional Species Protocol was dissolved. Humanity was granted full membership, with all rights and responsibilities that entailed. Chun remained at the platform as the session concluded. Delegates filed out, many stopping to speak with her. Some offered congratulations. Others expressed concerns about the future. A few simply nodded with what might have been respect. Sketh was among the last to approach. Ambassador Chun, a historic day. Representative, I want to thank you for keeping our secret, for speaking on our behalf. Sketh's mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as a dry laugh. I did not do it for humanity. I did it because I believed it was right. The Concord was built on principles of equality and mutual defense. We had strayed from those principles. Sometimes it takes a crisis to remind us of who we are supposed to be. And now? Now we rebuild. The Thornax have retreated, but they are not destroyed. Other threats exist. And humanity has technologies that could help protect us all if you are willing to share them. Chun nodded slowly. We are. The siege fleet was never meant to be ours alone. We built it for all of us, even if we could not admit it at the time. Then perhaps something good has come from all of this. Sketh turned to leave, then paused. Admiral Tanaka asked me to give you a message. She is at the memorial being constructed in the Verith system. She would like you to join her when you have time. The memorial was still under construction when Chun arrived. A massive structure of crystal and light. It would eventually contain the names of every being who died in the war. The list was long. Admiral Tanaka stood at the observation platform, looking out at the stars. The siege fleet was visible in the distance, still holding position, still growing. Ambassador. The vote went well? Better than I expected. The provisional protocol is abolished. Full membership. No restrictions. Good. Tanaka did not turn around. 30 years. 30 years of being told we were too dangerous, too violent, too untrustworthy. And in the end, those were exactly the qualities that saved everyone. Ironic, isn't it? Maybe. Or maybe it's a reminder that the things we think are weaknesses can become strengths. And the things we think make us different can be exactly what makes us valuable. A shuttle approached the memorial platform. Chun recognized the markings as Valori. When the vessel landed, a single figure emerged. Commander Verith, nephew of the High Admiral, who had died in the first battles. He approached Tanaka slowly, his silver robes now marked with signs of military rank. He had taken command of the surviving Valori forces after the main battle. Admiral Tanaka. Commander Verith. I came to ask you something. During the battle, your forces ran rescue operations. You save